Imagine you're one of the first human beings, and you're walking with your kid and you see a lion. And you don't know what a lion is, so you take your kid over to play with him. And the lion eats your kid. So you go home and you're sad, but it's okay. You get your wife pregnant, and in 5 years, you're walking again with your new kid and you see a lion far away. This time you hide with your kid and the lion eventually leaves and you both survive. So you come out, you start walking with your kid again, and a bird flies over, and all of a sudden, your kid drops dead. And you go home sad again. You get your wife pregnant again, and you make a promise to yourself. You're going to make sure that you hide your new kid from lions, and that you'll hide him if you see a bird flying over. So there are two ways that we think. Both of the decisions that you made are based on the fast, automatic thought process, which Kahneman calls System 1. System 1 is where we find how irrational and illogical, or just simply how stupid we really are, so it can lead us to not value System 1 or think that it's useless. If you had used your slow, more rational and logical thinking, you would have found that you were right about the lion, but the bird had nothing to do with your kid's death. But we should value System 1 because it has huge benefits. It's the reason why we've survived. Yes, maybe at the cost of some really ridiculous assumptions, like your kid dying every time a bird flies over. But if we had rationally thought about what a loud noise might mean and analyze it carefully instead of being scared and running away from it immediately, we wouldn't be here. So big idea 1 is understanding System 1 and System 2. There are huge benefits to both systems. The problem, however, really arises when we use System 1 instead of System 2, when System 2 would be the appropriate system to use. And this leads us to all kinds of biases and fallacies that are not optimal. It's not optimal to think that if a bird flies over, your kid will drop dead. So if I were to ask you these two questions, what would your answer be? 1. Is the height of the tallest redwood more or less than 1,200 feet? And 2. What is your best guess about the height of the tallest redwood? So one group was asked these questions, and another group was asked the exact same questions, except instead of 1,200 feet in the first question, this time they were asked whether the height of the tree was more or less than only 180 feet. So what do you think the answers looked like? The first group's mean guess was 844 feet. The second group's mean guess was only 282 feet. That is a huge difference. This is what is known as anchoring. So ask yourself, and throughout this video, how can knowing this be useful to you? Dan Ariely, one of my favorite economists, talks about how we have no idea about most things and what they should cost. If you're not an expert, just like we aren't in most things, you don't know how tall a redwood tree should be. I don't know what a microwave should cost when I go buy it. Should it be $99? $199? I have no idea. So we use different ways to approximate what it should be, and anchoring is one of them. So again, how is this useful to you personally? If you're the buyer, do you want to look at the MSRP and be anchored to that? If you're selling something, how do you want to set up your MSRP to use anchoring to your advantage? Big idea 2 is understanding anchoring. So one of the things that I really enjoy about my life is the peace of mind I have while doing things. When I visit somewhere, I'm not worried about a terrorist attack, and when I fly there, I'm not worried about the plane crashing. And that peace of mind largely comes from the fact that I'm not really a big consumer of mainstream media. But I meet people all the time who are really constantly worried. Have you seen how terrorism is taken over the world? What are we headed towards? Have you seen how planes are just crashing all the time now? But in reality, it's not like the chances of those two things have risen in some dramatic proportion. They're highly unlikely, and I mean a probability very close to 0 that your plane will crash. And this is what is known as the science of availability. Even an event that has an almost non-existent probability of happening to you can be assigned a reasonable or even a high probability by you just because of what's available to you. So again, ask yourself, how can you use this concept to make your life better? Is it better to enjoy your life and realize that the world is actually not as bad as commonly portrayed, or watch the news every day where you'll be shown constant death and destruction because that's what sells? Big idea 3 is understanding the science of availability. Now, let's say I offer you to play a game with me. We're going to flip a coin. And if you win $1,000. And if you lose $1,000. Do you want to play that game? If you're like most people, that is a game that you do not want to play. What if we change the rules a little bit? If you win 1,100, and if you lose only 1,000. From an expected value point of view, that is a good game to play. But if I asked you to play that game right now, and you knew that there was a 50% chance of losing your 1,000, if you're like most people, you still wouldn't play, even though there's also a 50% chance of winning 1,100. This is called loss aversion. Most people are very loss averse. In fact, you have to offer somewhere about $2,000 to get people to play. Now, this might be interesting, but again, ask yourself, how can you use understanding this in your life? You know you're going to be more convincing explaining to someone what they're risking losing instead of what they could possibly gain. So maybe you want to convince someone that being an alcoholic is bad. How do you want to go about doing that? Do you want to talk about how they could possibly gain a better job and make more money if they overcome